when you get off the bike and that sort of flood of chemicals that's been fight or flighting, which is so native to us, isn't it? We would have had that experience every day originally. What happens then when you sit down just to read a book or have a conversation or try and draw or make is, I think, the flood of chemicals that's been fighting or flighting is very beneficial then to what you do next.
Hello and welcome to Move to Live with me, Akram Khan, brought to you by Marquee TV, the streaming platform introducing incredible performances from across the arts right to your screen. As a dancer, choreographer and director, I've made movement my life's work. I'm fascinated by how the way we move affects the way we live and how the way we live shapes our movement. How do the things we see affect the way we move, for example? And what happens if we don't get the opportunity to move? I'm always thinking about these things. In the first podcast, I told you a bit about how I tick, but from now on, it's not about me. Today, I'm talking to the brilliant designer, Es Devlin, who has lent her creative vision to everything from Beyoncé world tours to Olympic ceremonies. What can I say about Ez? Honestly, I look at her CV and it seems to me I've done very little in my life. She's a force of nature, and she's also full of wisdom. We're all going to learn a lot. Hi Ez, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
I know you're super busy, so we've been trying to connect for so long in person, so I needed to arrange a podcast to find an excuse to get you here. But I wanted to ask you, straight off the bat, as a designer, what does movement mean to you?
Oh, such a great question. I would answer that in a multitude of ways because there's movement of every single atom in the room, right? There's movement of performer. There's movement of the eyes of the audience. There's actually movement of the calibration of each eye. Every time you change a lighting state, what you're really doing is adjusting and calibrating the diameter of the lens of the iris, of the centre of every single pupil of every eye in the room. And that's huge. That's like the biggest mechanic we're dealing with. And then there's that broader piece of the movement. I really respond to spaces in terms of what medicine I feel they need sometimes. And I think about the number of molecules that are in the room, even in this little room that we're in. But when I'm in very big spaces, something like the Olivier Theatre or Wembley Stadium, there's an awful lot of molecules that have got to come to the party with us for something to happen, for us to feel moved. And so we need to ignite chain reactions that go from a flick of a performer's wrist or from one thing they said and, resonate and reverberate. So that's something that I think about movement.
I mean, looking at your list of projects, it seems like you never sit still. How do you organize your time? I mean, do you know how many projects you have on the go right now?
Yeah, we've got about 15.
15 projects?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Are they all large scale, some smaller scale?
No, they're all different. But the way that I think, feel quite centred and calm about things, even though there are a lot of things, is each one as it enters my orbit, it only comes into orbit because it's part of that little solar system that's going on anyway. And I view each one as a different scene in one continuous film script in a way, especially as I get older. It wasn't always the case. But now, as I feel like I'm halfway through my life, I've got quite purposeful about each piece I make from now on. Yes, I spent many years learning a craft, but I want each piece to be part of this one narrative, really. And yes, it will have lots of, branches coming off it. But that way, I feel like everything is going in one direction, which is broadly to speak about structures that separate us and to try to dismantle them and to try instead to help convene structures that bind us and that connect us. That's the broad sort of premise now of everything I want to make. And guess what? Loads of people feel like that. And loads of people want to make work that's about that. So I'm not finding it hard to convene around that subject.
But do you ever come to a situation where you have a hierarchy set up in terms of strategizing what takes priority, which project takes priority at any one time?
Do you know, it's really interesting you ask that, because when I sit down with my studio team, I've got about 10 people in my team, and, you know, we'll sit down on a morning, and instead of having like a chart on the wall with all the things we're doing, I just write them down in order of the ones that I think about most. And that tells me a lot. And then I look around the table, I say, what have I forgotten?
Yeah.
And there's always a couple that just haven't buoyed to the surface because I'm a little bit fearful of them, or I haven't quite got my head around them yet. I haven't found my way in yet, or I haven't resolved, or there's something that isn't working and maybe that project will go away. But I rely on just the older I get, the more I just really trust a moment. How will I feel in that moment? What projects come to mind to me in that moment when I'm with my people who are helping me make them? And that tells me a lot about, you know, what might need to stay, what might need to go, what I need to pay more attention to, you know.
It's so beautiful to hear the way you kind of eloquently describe your relationship with your process, but also the movement process of your tribe, really. So it's not you working alone, it's you moving with a tribe. Was it a long process of acquiring this particular group of people that you must have full trust in, I presume?
It's such an interesting thing to consider, in that when I began, I was a set designer, and set designers, you know, don't get paid very much money. And I started to just about afford one assistant. And that assistant would come on days. We'd pay them by the day when they could come. Then gradually, there was two, and then there was three. But I was completely not good at delegating anything. You know, I would hoard control of every decision. I was a hoarder of my relationships with my collaborators. I hadn't developed a generosity of spirit, really. It was only, honestly, when I had kids, when I was 35, I had the first one, that I had to. It was very hard for me to get pregnant and have the children. So I sort of made a promise with whatever higher spirit. I didn't give it a name, but I did make a promise when I was really praying to have a child. I really wanted to get pregnant. It was not easy. And I made a sort of deal with whatever spirits were going to allow this to happen. And I said, if you let me get pregnant, I'll stop working. And then I did it. I stopped, and I handed everything that I was doing over to my group of, at the time, it was 4 women who were working with me, and they became completely empowered. Mm-hmm. They did it all. And it took that to help me learn to properly delegate after that. And the studio's been built up, you know, ever since then, really.
And there's movement when there's more than one person, because it's a fluid dialogue and exchange of ideas. When you give them the freedom to feed back to you, or to give their feedback, to kind of, it's like a tennis ball from side to side, which brings me to the concept of collaboration. What does that mean to you? Because for me, that's movement.
I once said to someone, I don't know what elaboration is. I only know the collaboration bit, but I have learnt a lot from dance and from choreography, actually. Also, just watching a choreographer really plant the idea of a movement in the muscle of another human being, and watching that movement grow. And when you're dealing muscle to muscle, muscle memory to muscle memory like that, it's very profound and intimate, isn't it? Sharing, because everything that went into that movement that you offer, one of your performers, is something that came to you through a gazillion things that happened in your life. And that's the same for me gesturally with a pencil gesture. If I give to one of my team this flick of the wrist for pencil gesture, it only was like that because of everything that led up to it. So the collaboration is very intimate, and it's based on profound trust and profound curiosity, extensive curiosity. And in my room now, my 8 designers, 2 juniors that I have, they are all, I mean, they're extremely extremely skilled group of people, and they can all do things that I can't do. They have all been chosen because they, I guess, reverberate aspects of me like octopus tentacles, and I'm like an octopus with these little stubs. You know, I've got instincts in these directions, but I never spent long enough in any one of them. So each one of them expands one idea into something I would never have thought of.
What's really incredible about listening to you talk, every time I hear you talk, two things that come to mind. One of them is the gift that you have, the art that you have of storytelling, regardless of which genre or form or lens that you're telling that story through. The other one that I find really intriguing always with your work is that there's a real kind of to and fro, a fluidity between two not extreme, but different worlds. One of them is the literal world, and the other one is the ambiguous metaphoric world. Are you conscious about that movement, or does that just happen naturally, subconsciously?
It's very interesting that you pick up on that, because ever since I was at school, it was very instinctive to me to look for the concrete in the poetic and look for the poetic in the practical. That was just how I rolled. And I think maybe some of the teachers thought I was a bit weird. But, you know, I was in the books that I read when I was studying my literature, I grasped anything that was a phrase like memory palace, that kind of concretization into a palace of memory, for example. Anything that did that, because it wouldn't sit still. I like the vibrancy of it, the movement of it, because those two words can't sit still together, because you can't make a palace out of memory. But guess what? That's what poetry is to me. Words that won't, they're like magnets that just keep bouncing off each other, and they require of you to keep holding them together in your imagination, really.
Talking about your childhood, I just read that you played 3 instruments growing up, the piano, violin, and clarinet. That part I never knew. What is your relationship between music and movement? And were your parents, they were musicians, I presume, or?
No.
Oh, no, they were designers, right?
No.
No, okay.
My mother was a teacher of kids with dyslexia. Okay. And my father was a journalist specialising in education. He loved to write about schools. So that's what they did. They gave us the opportunity to learn instruments, as many as we wanted to learn. And the lessons were available at school. And then, I became quite dedicated to it. And it was most of my life when I was a kid, you know. And we had to drive to the lessons eventually. So it was like Tuesday night was youth orchestra, Wednesday night was wind band, Thursday morning was the violin lesson. Then on Saturday mornings I'd come up to London for a sort of lesson of piano and clarinet. And I really worked hard on all of them. And I also drew my instruments. I would do drawings of a violin, and I was very interested in how the instruments looked. And for me as a teenager particularly, being able to put my whole body into a piece of beautifully shaped wood, being able to draw my arm across it, that release, and being able to be a sort of time traveller or a time machine, knowing that these little notes on the page were written by someone who lived in a time that was so distant from my own. And that sense of order, playing this Baroque ordered music when I was in pubescent 13-year-old drug-fueled chaos, you know. So the movement of the arms over the piano, you know, it's a very physical thing. You put your whole body into a piano or a violin or even a clarinet. You put your whole breath into a clarinet. So it was a big part of my life until I was about 18. When I went to university, I didn't have time. But I feel that I don't play now, but I did do so much, and I travelled with youth orchestras and stuff, and I took it really seriously. So I think now that sense of what it's like to be in an orchestra when you are playing the offbeat, and yet you're part of this huge swathe of something way bigger than you could ever make yourself. I still feel like that when I'm watching like a huge Super Bowl and I just did this bit of it, you know. So I take it with me. and phrasing. I think certainly that training has been translated into what I do now.
And then what happened at university? You stopped doing music? I mean, like learning instruments, and how did you get into visual
Well, I always drew.
storytelling?
I always drew. I always painted. I always made things. And we made gifts, all of us. I'm one of 4 kids. And we didn't have a ton of money. And if ever there was a gift time, someone's birthday, Christmas, it was, you have to make it. And there wasn't much to do. You know what it was like. There was the back of a cereal packet with a dotted line saying, improve me. So we did a lot of cutting out cereal packets, making stuff with what we could find, right? And we made clothes and things. And I grew up in a rural situation. There wasn't tons to do. So I went to university and studied English literature, mainly because I didn't really feel ready to make work as an artist yet. All my friends at school who were going off to do their art foundation course, they sort of had a confidence and a certainty about their attitude, which I didn't. I was just curious. I just wanted to read and learn. I felt like there was so much more to learn before I could open my mouth, really. So I read and wrote essays for 3 years, but I was still drawing and painting. And then I did my foundation art course at St. Martin's after the English degree. Mm-hmm. So I did it all back to front.
And was there someone in your life, because there was definitely several people in my life as I was growing up that had a huge influence when I was growing up, especially towards movement and dance. And actually, it wasn't even necessarily dancers, it was actors and circus artists. Was there someone that kind of inspired you?
I think I had some really good teachers at my primary school who encouraged me mainly. I remember there was one music teacher who had us all sit in the dark. She just turned all the lights off and said to really appreciate, this sense of your ear, just let's turn your eyes off. So I really valued that. And there was another guy who really encouraged us to be different, to be, to not follow, to have faith that we could be, individual. So I remember those 2 teachers particularly, and my parents. They're really hard workers, and they really cared enough about our education. They're real education enthusiasts. So anything we wanted to learn, they'd find us a way to learn it. So I'd say those were probably the biggest influences growing up. When we didn't have a TV, we bought one. Actually, we really wanted a TV. But my mum and dad, for a certain time, they looked after 3 more children. So there were 7 of us. And these are my cousins. And they were from Canada, and they brought, they had the telly on all the time. My mum said, I can't bear it. So she kicked the telly out. And then when we wanted one, we went busking, me and my brothers and sisters. And we busked. And we bought a telly. But yeah, we didn't have much telly. So the outside world, it was really what we read. The town we lived in, going to the seaside every day. The sea was a big influence. We went to the seaside, Camber Sands, Winchelsea Beach down in Sussex. We went there all the time.
It must be really a different experience growing up without a television, as opposed to your children who, do you apply the same principle where you have a TV or don't have a TV, or do you have rules about that?
No, I don't really, because I think our kids grow up in this medium. They grow up in this water. And I think for our children to be of service in their communities, in society as they grow, they need to understand what it is.
Or they get left behind.
Yeah, I speak to some people who say, I'm not going to let my child have a phone. I was like, okay, I respect that. That's cool. I'm really hoping that, a bit like me when I had a Donkey Kong one summer when I was about, I can't remember, I must have been about 12 or something. And I got this Donkey Kong, and I got completely addicted to the blooming Donkey Kong game. And then I was sort of disgusted with myself and chucked it aside and never touched it again. And I think with my children, they are calibrating. They know how it feels when they are on their thing too much. They get it. And I think the best way for me to draw them into other areas is not to prohibit, but to draw to something else. And to say, they observe me in my studio drawing, and they gravitate in there, they want to draw. Or we have a ritual. Actually, oddly enough, telly is now like high art, isn't it, compared to just watching a 2-second TikTok. So me and my son have a ritual every night where we watch, part of a series. And my son's really addicted to narrative. So we do these we do these episodes that go on for months and months and months. So I think the rituals may not be what they were when we were growing up, but my approach has been, if I try and overlay my own experience onto my children's, it's just inappropriate. It doesn't work. It's a different time. I'd rather seek within their new framework, where can I find these rituals? And for me, it's with my son at night time, watching these series, and with my daughter, she wants to draw. So we're in the room and we're drawing together and we're chatting. And then my husband loves to cook. So he does, when he cooks, we do gather and we light a candle. I'm obsessed with lighting the candles in the house as well. I think if you're seeking a bit more ritual, then light a few candles, and then the screens tend to just sort of go off a bit, because people enjoy that vibe of a bit of music and the candle,
It's so beautiful to hear about rituals and how each artist or each person that I've interviewed has a completely different ritual. My ritual is doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The whole family does it now.
Wow. So there you go.
Yeah, we have a studio
eating
in the
together,
back.
you got the jiu-jitsu going on.
Yeah, we choke each other out and break knees and knee joints and stuff like that.
I've got one to share with you, which has become really important to me, which I've trained myself to wake up. I set the alarm to wake up 20 minutes before I need to get up. And then that 20 minutes is free. It is free of the architecture of the day that I've imposed upon myself. We impose these architectures on ourselves, and then we go, why are we stuck in these architectures? But I guess it's a new architecture, but I've given myself this 20 minutes where it's not part of anything else. And I've sort of trained myself now to, when I wake up, the way that my room is arranged is there's a line of light or two that land on a blank wall. I've kept the wall completely blank, and it's just coming out the side of my blinds, of my curtains. And when I travel, it's there as well. Whichever curtains you close, unless you're really careful, there's normally one little gap. And if when you wake up you look for it, there'll be a line of light on your wall somewhere. It might be on a cloudy day, very faint and amorphous, and then it might sharpen as the sun comes out. And it's not there every day. And when you wake up and you see it, right, I got a good one today. And I photograph them now as well and film them. But I just commune with that glimpse of our nearest star, on which we all depend, which our whole body is nourished by, and our whole life is no movement without that star. And I consider my room to be just like a kind of lens, a frame for my view of that star, and it gives me a perspective on the day that I carry around with me for the day. And I really recommend that ritual.
And is there anything you do physically in terms of, have you ever been drawn to doing yoga or?
I do my yoga.
Meditation?
Yeah,
you do yoga?
I do my yoga. I have the other part of my room has a little mat in it, and I just do my little sequence that I know how to do, and either listen to music. That's my sort of moving meditation. I might sit still for some of it, but there's a sort of moving meditation I love doing the yoga. I cycle as well. That isn't so meditative. That's generally more fight or flight, like don't fall off.
But why do you cycle? What's the necessity?
I think chemically, being in that chemistry of fight or flight chemicals that are going off in your mind, it's very intense. I cycle quite fast on an electric bike through London all day, every day when I'm going about. This evening I didn't come because it was too rainy, but all this week in the pissing rain, I've been on this bike going west.
Are you serious? In London?
Yeah. I mean, I have all the gear on, but when you stop, when you get off the bike, and that sort of flood of chemicals that's been fight or flighting, which is so native to us, isn't it? We would have had that experience every day originally. What happens then when you sit down just to read a book or have a conversation or try and draw or make is, I think, the flood of chemicals that's been fighting or flighting is very beneficial then to what you do next. And then I try to sleep, because I used to really deprive myself of sleep. and just try and get stuff done, following the will-o'-the-wisp of the curiosity to wherever it took me late into the night. And I used to love the freedom of you could work all night. Then I read something about what happens when you sleep, that it's like this wash, this bath of minerals and chemicals that seeps up around your brain and just gives them this bath. And when it recedes in the morning, every aspect of your brain has just been flooded like a plant being watered. And once I started to imagine my brain like that, then I wanted that to happen rather than this kind of parched, plant drying up and, gasping for water. So I treat my brain better now.
Do you dream your ideas?
I do.
When you're awake, do the ideas come to you?
No, I mean, my favourite dream is when you wake up having had an idea. And something...
In your dream?
Yeah, and something... Well, and that 20-minute period is beautiful as well, because you're in a lucid dreaming state. And 20 minutes, I think, is the perfect rapid eye movement cycle. If you let yourself know that you don't really have to get up for another 20 minutes, that's when you remember those last bit of dreams. So you can train yourself to remember those last bits, which are really fruitful creatively. But something happened to me. I made a project... I was asked, actually, to make a project about Londoners. I said, well, can I do it about the 15,000 Londoners that aren't human, 15,000 species of Londoners that aren't human? And so I chose 250 of the most endangered London species. And I drew them over 4 months. And I started to dream about animals. And it sort of shamed me that I didn't normally dream about animals. And I thought, God, in another lifetime, in another moment, we would have dreamt about animals all the time. And I was dreaming these amazing dreams about animals, mysterious animals, my kind of confabulation of animals. And animals did actually start coming to my house as well. More animals showed up. So that really changed me and made me realise how important it is to make that connection to the more than human world in our imagination, and to make a habitat for the more than human world in the human imagination. And that's become a really important practice of mine now.
It's so interesting because for me, when I'm working on any process, any project, especially with human beings, during the process of creation or play or research, animals start to appear in my dreams of the dancers who are dancing. So I start to, in my dream, I start to have the animal in mind, like a bit like where you have not a soul spirit or another
like an anima.
Yeah, an anima, exactly. And I don't usually confront them with that animal, because then they start replicating that and imitating that animal. Sometimes I tell them towards the end,
right,
when they're very confident with their character. But every human being for me is so attached to animals, but it comes in my dreams.
That's wonderful.
It doesn't come when I'm awake.
Yeah.
For example, if you created a scenography or a set, I always find it difficult to call it a set because I feel like it's stuck. And when I
call it a stage sculpture.
Stage sculptor. This stage sculpture, do you think of it in a moving term, or is it different? One's a monolith. One project is something that actually moves. How do you confront, or how do you see your stage sculptures in movement form? Or?
I mean, it's evolved, because when I began, I really was trained to, I guess, be more like a costume designer of an environment around performers and around story. But as my practice has grown, I've grown in confidence to present, and I've learned actually an attitude towards objects where I do consider objects in life as protagonists. And I think a lot about what is this cup made of? What's this microphone made of? Who made it? Who are the hands that touched it? What were the processes? And I think more and more, probably, we're going to need to evolve that practice of etymology of each thing we cherish and hold. And I think we're going to need to be much more ritualistic about every object we possess, just as resources get scarcer. And it will be probably something that will be a benefit. So I began to have the respect for objects on a stage as protagonists themselves. And it always fascinates me when you go backstage and you look at the props table, and it's like each prop has its own little dressing room, and it says keys or crushed Coke can on a little bit of tape, and they have a little tape dividing line because they must stay in their place. And actually they play their part in the scene. And I learnt that one of my first jobs was a stagehand. I was a stagehand for Charlie Chaplin's daughter, Victoria, and her husband, Jean-Baptiste Thierry. They had if you remember, they had a circus called Le Cirque Invisible, which was at the Riverside Studio. And my job was to hand the props to the clown. I had to put the rabbit in the hat, Akram. I had to put the rabbit in the hat. That was one of my jobs, and clean away the goose shit, because we had to have a goose in a fake saucepan thing, and I had to clean up the goose shit. Anyway, so I learned that if I got something wrong, if I didn't put the right banana in the right coat pocket, then that timing of that comic beat would fuck up completely. It would fail completely. So I learnt the importance of objects as protagonists, and in my own practice I began to have the courage to present my sculpture on stage boldly, not as a background, but as a co-artist. So in the Lehman trilogy, for example, there's this revolving glass room that is probably the fourth actor, along with then you have the pianist and the three human actors. But it has to be there dancing with the performers. And that's now more and more the case. And actually, the directors I work with now are also a bit bolder to say, well, actually, there's one we just did in New York, actually. It's on at the moment, called The Hunt, where we plonked this glass house right in the middle of the stage as a magic trick. And it's got electric glass, so it keeps revealing and concealing a dog. Sometimes it's full of like 20 people crowded into the space of this glass house. Sometimes there's just one person. Sometimes it's empty. Someone's got a chair. It's like a magic trick. And that director, Rupert Gould, was bold enough to say, I'll let this object have centre stage. It's an obstacle. But I think if we can consider objects as protagonists, not just in theatre or in art, but in life, and that respect for the minerals that make up our life as beings, I think that's going to end up serving us quite well as resources. Let's not call them resources anymore, because that's a crappy word, right?
Yeah. It reminds me so much, when you say protagonist, I also think of antagonist, because of when I worked with Anish Kapoor for the first time in my life, and I was just starting in my career, and this wonderful, wonderful human being called Angela Bernstein introduced me to Anish Kapoor, and I was kind of gobsmacked to meet him, and he came up, we spoke a little bit. Nitin was doing the music, Nitin Sawhney, our dear friend.
I remember, yeah.
And he created this enormous, powerful kind of square, which was like a black hole. And it transformed because it sometimes got deeper. It just played with your eyes, right?
The Vanta Black.
Yes. And I was just a bit like, shit. Like, I've choreographed something so powerful, and now that's standing in the way. I can't compete with it. So I thought about it, and then I thought, you know what? Let me treat it like a person. So it's a sixth dancer, because there were 5 of us. And so I reconfigured and choreographed, giving it the space as if I were a dancer. And suddenly it became an antagonist and sometimes a protagonist. Yeah. And suddenly it was not a set anymore.
Yeah.
It was a dancer like us.
I think that's right. I mean, the great artist William Kentridge does that, because he, is a visual artist. And when he told me this story, he's been a bit of a mentor to me, actually. And he told me this story that when he first had opera singers in the room, first time he was directing opera singers, the first bit of the week, he said, went not well. He didn't know how to do it. And then he said, look, I've got to do this my way. And he sat down with them, and he had his little salt and pepper pots on his set design and his little model bits. He said, I'm just going to move you around like this. Let me do it my way. Just have a look at this. And then he found his way into it by working with the protagonists of the paper cardboard model, the cardboard protagonists, and then allowing them to communicate to the performers, to the singers. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And most of the objects that I make are kinetic. They do move. I never forget, this is a funny story, sitting in a play in the West End years ago, and I think they were American tourists were watching the play, and they started to leave at the interval. And the wife said to the husband, look, let's leave. It's not that interesting. And that set is clearly not going to move. It wasn't my play, but I just thought it was so funny. And I always have that in my mind.
Right.
But most of the work I make now, I really enjoy, I do a lot of things that revolve, not least because I think our eyes as a species have been so much trained by, first it began with the zoetrope. That was like a magic trick. Mm. And then, of course, the zoetrope moved to the, moving image film. And now it's these things in our hand. So I think a contemporary audience, if you give them that sense of things will keep moving, things will keep going, they're more calm. Mm-hmm. They will still, this beautiful phrase that Lindsay Turner, a director colleague of mine, gave me actually, she said, we still the ego for the greater good. Mm. And that's what's happening in a theatre. We all agree the audience pretends they're not there. The actors pretends that the audience is not there. And we all agree to do this at precisely 7:30 p.m. We agree to still the ego for the greater good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great description, I think, of what's happening.
I remember when I worked with Anthony Gormley and Siddhi Ladabhishek, dear friend, choreographer, and Nathan Soni, we made a piece called 0 Degrees. And so we made copies of us, Larbi and me. So there was an exact dummy made out of, that was me, and one of Larbi, but mine was made first. And Anthony, at that time, we were in Belgium, and he got on the Eurostar, and he had covered me, or the dummy, that was shaped like me, in black dustbin liner, whatever you call it, bin bag. But he didn't have enough, so the feet were sticking out. And he arrived late. And the first thing he said was, he was complaining and going, the bloody security wouldn't let me through. They thought I was carrying a dead body. And I said, well, it looks like you are traveling with a dead body. And then he plonked it down and he said, well, let's get on with it. What are we doing? And when I saw myself, because it's a copy of me, I was so upset, so devastated. I don't know. You just feel like you're better than you actually are, right? And I was like, is that really my size? Like, I thought I was taller. I thought I was thinner. I thought I was more muscular. And he's like, no, that's exactly you. We made it based on your body. We, put the whole kind of, the material around you, they shaped it around, and then it became hardened. And so that's you. And I was like, are you sure you haven't changed the size? Anyway, I was not happy about it. So I left it on the side.
Oh.
And then what happened was, I left it on the floor. And then what happened was Larbi, smart that he is, started interacting with it, seeing perhaps that I wasn't responding to it. And he was interacting with my body in a way that made me jealous. And I started to get emotionally attached.
Very smart, very smart.
And he would constantly dance with that rather than me. Like, I'm the original. Doesn't dance with me. And so towards the end of the day, what was really revealing was he left it on the floor intentionally. He did a thing, left it on the floor, and we were just about to leave, turn the light off. I said, no, hold on. It was my body. So I went, picked it up, put it on a chair.
Right. Took care.
And I said, you know what, let's give it a name, because I think that'll change things. And Ladvi and I discussed it, and we called it Marka, which is the reverse of Akram.
Oh, that's smart.
And so every morning I say, good morning, Marka, did you sleep well? And bit by bit, I started to converse and create a relationship with this object that I started to have a practice with every morning, a ritual with every morning, talking to it, sitting next to it. I would eat lunch with it.
Wow.
And then suddenly when I looked at the object on stage, it wasn't an object anymore. It was very much an investment, emotional investment that I had given it, and it had given me back. Do you feel your objects, or these moving scenographies or moving beautiful sculptures that you make, are they characters? Do you give it characters? Do you give it names?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
give it...
And you see, my belief, and I think, you and I have talked about this before, is that, this period we're living in, I think we'll look back at it as this odd aberration, perhaps since the enclosures, let's say 500 years ago, of not having common ground, or even, since the last couple of hundred years of not practicing weekly ritual. If you consider in the history of our species, this is like a fragment of our history, and it's such an odd thing to not do. In any other moment of our history, we would have had a weekly gathering. We would have had hundreds of feast days where we would have danced around a maypole, gone on a fire procession, lit up a bonfire and, torched a figurine at the top of it, sung in choral, communal gatherings. I think we long for this in our bones, in our bodies. And I think we long for it synesthetically. I think we've forgotten that we're synesthetic beings and that we smell through our eyes and we learn through our feet and we listen through the hairs on the edge of our arms. And for me, these objects, the reason they're not just sculptures is because they are accompanied by music. Like when my objects move, they breathe. I can hear them move because I've got my sound designer. Even today, I was doing a meeting for Coriolanus. We've got this big set of this huge lump of stuff that's going to breathe up and it there's always sound when it moves, and there's probably light as well. So everything I make is made for a synesthetic audience because audiences are, because we are. And we keep forgetting it. And it's depriving us. It's making us unhappy. It's making us buy shit we don't need, be horrible to each other, treat each other as other. Because we're depriving ourselves as humans of these fundamental things, our birthright of ritual and synesthetic, sensuousness in the world, being sensually present in the moment. So yeah, the objects certainly have personhood, personality, and they breathe and they have sound and they have light. They have a chronology, they have a tempo, all of that. They don't just, but they've got to be carefully choreographed.
But with your work, it has to be also very tactile, right? Your studio space, what is it like? Just describe it. And are your kids there all the time?
Well, there's a really exciting development that's just happened. It was William Kentridge who really guided me on this. He came to my studio, which has been in my house ever since my kids were quite young. I had a studio outside my house, but my studio complained that I never turned up because I just wanted to always, not miss my kids. So I would just not show up at my studio. And, that didn't go down well with my team. I would just do stuff in my bedroom at home, like I always did. And so I moved the studio into the front room of my house. And that's where it was from 2017 until literally this year just gone.
So are you saying the people who were in your actual studio moved into your front?
We had everyone in my front room. They've been there. I've been running my operation from my front room since 2017 until the end of 2023.
You're OG. You're original gangster, I'm telling you.
From my front room. And my kids would come in and out, and my cats, everyone. And William Kentridge came around. He said, listen, Ez, this is all great, but you need to get rid of all these people. You need this room to be your studio where you just make your work, where you come in here and you don't have to lead or teach or collaborate. You just need a room where you can fuck up and just make what you want and experiment. So I really took his words to heart because he's such a important mentor to me, and it made so much sense. So just now we got a new studio, and now the new studio has this beautiful calm aspect and it belongs to the team. And now my studio at home, I just had the most beautiful weekend just before Christmas. Literally, I spent the weekend putting all my pencils in order from H to 8B, putting all my colours, all my oil paints in order from like white all the way down through to scarlet, all my pastels. I just ordered everything and got piles of materials. And started making stuff I don't know how to do. I don't know if I can paint anymore. I've not painted for years. So I want to try. And I've set myself, I did these drawings of 250 animals, which I didn't know I could do. And it changed me to do it. It changed my hand. I began to feel this porosity between the veins on my hand and the veins on the bat wing that I was drawing, or the knuckles of my fingers and the knuckles of the bird wing. And I hadn't felt that continuity of self, that this porosity, the continuity of being. And now I want to do it again. I'm going to start in a minute and present in October. This will be drawings of people and maps of faces that I don't know from places that I've never been to. So I'm doing that with UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency in England. And my kids have started to gravitate into my room. The way the animals came when I was drawing animals, my kids just creep in and they've started doing portraits. They see me doing a portrait, they want to do one. And they're brilliant. So, yeah, it feels really good at the moment in the studio.
William's been a big mentor to you.
I discovered his work at the Whitechapel when he had that huge exhibition, probably a decade or so ago. And it was really his piece, Secondhand Reading, which is that beautiful flicking pages of a book, and there's a dancer. And he's drawn it in sort of stop frame charcoal drawings, and there's this beautiful piece of music. And I guess that quality of digital and analog. I've just made an exhibition actually to go with the book, and somebody reviewed it and said it was of this moment where we might pay for our groceries with a chip inserted into our wrist, but we'd still write the shopping list in cursive on a scrap of paper. That's this moment, this sort of weird skeuomorphic is a term for it apparently, this weird moment we're living through where we are in this sort of bardo limbo state between digital and analog. We've still got these bodies, however much our heads are stuck in these headsets and gadgets. We've got these inconvenient appendages. However much we might think of emigrating to another planet, guess what? We've got these bodies that are so firmly rooted to the earth. And our bodies haven't evolved at anything like the speed, which is why my bicycle journey has still got the fight or flight, because our bodies and our chemical reactions are slow to evolve. So, yeah, I think that's what drew me to William's work, that fusion of the analog and the digital, actually.
Yes, you've been amazing. It's just been incredible to hear your wisdom and your insights and your openness to share such, to really kind of experience the way you see the world, I think, and the way you see objects and the way you see movement and the way you see or hear or feel music. So thank you deeply for sharing that.
Can I tell you one story about yourself back to you before we finish?
Is it really bad?
And no, it's so beautiful. I just want everyone to hear it. So when we were talking during the pandemic and I said to you, Akram, what are you missing most during this time? And it was a very bleak time, remember? And you said something that has meant so much to me and to many others who I've shared it with. You said, it's the quality of the way that time passes when I'm either an audience member or performing. And you explained it to me. You said we move away from Chronos, this more contemporary mechanical time, and we revert back to the original Kairos, this time of the womb, time of storytelling, spiritual time, sacred time, time of the planetary time, the solar time. And you described exactly how this happens when you move onto the stage and this new way of time envelops us all, whether we're audience or performer. And you just said, you put your finger, you said, that's what I miss. And the beautiful thing about you having articulated that was not only did I share that with many people, and it really comforted them to consider that throughout the pandemic, but also subsequently to remember that's what we missed, and therefore to cherish it and ensure that we partake of that type of passing of time together. So that was so important to me. I just wanted to add it here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Perfect end. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Move to Live, and do keep an eye out for more episodes here on Marquee TV. And feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. The email address is movetolivepodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on our socials. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So until the next time, goodbye, and please, always keep moving.